Homeland and Ablat Gemara. We are beginning today a new Masechta Kesuvos, and the Rambam and the Teis Yom Tov at the beginning of every Masechta they write why this Masechta is in that particular order, and it seems that they say the very first Masechta in Noshim should have been Kesuvos. I guess the documentation of what the support of the marriage before even we talk about how the marriage exactly works. But Yevamah nevertheless went first. And why did Yevamah go first? So they say that some say Yevamah went first because that's the only marriage which is a coerced marriage. The rest of the marriages are voluntary, or that marriage is from the Eibishter made to happen. The rest of the marriages we have to initiate. Anyways, we have a Kesuvah. A Kesuvah is basically the document between the husband and wife, and the most important part of it is it's like an alimony or something. If the marriage does not work out, what her payments are. There's a big machlekes if Kesuvah is from the Torah or from the Rabbanon. They bring a pasuk Kemoyer Hapsulah. You should pay her Kemoyer Hapsulah, and the Kemoyer Hapsulah means like the dowry you normally give to Hapsulah. It says Kesef Yishko Kemoyer Hapsulah. So it sounds like it's talking about a Kesuvah. So some hold, if Gamliel hold that it's Mahatayra, and Rabbeinu Tam Paskins that actually is Mahatayra. There are others who say, and most opinions say that it's like a Chachamim, that it's only Midrabbanon and not Mahatayra. There are those who say that it is Mahatayra, but the amount is only Midrabbanon. And there are those who say that it's the Chachamim have decided how much, and once the Chachamim decided to put it in place, it became Mahatayra. So Kesuvah plays a very important part. In fact, I once saw Bill Havart, for a psula, for a girl who was never married before, we give her 200 zuz, and for an almana, she gets 100. We'll see tomorrow later if you know that almana comes from the word mana, 100. Why does the psula get 200? So that we just said we learned out from the pasuk kimoy har hapsulas, like the dowry you give to psulas. But the word moy har, if you break it up, it's kama reish. How much? 200. This 200, whether it's what kind of dinarim is it? There's medina, there's tsuri, because they used to mix silver in it. If it's 50 shkolim, that's what they pay over there by. If you learn from that pasuk, which is 50 shkolim, you have to pay a penalty if you seduce a girl. Then 50 shkolim is 200 zuzim. A quarter of it is silver equals 50 shkolim. That's where you get the number 200 from, and so on and so forth. There's an interesting chakir in Achrayim already. When does the chiv of Kesuvah start? As soon as you get married, you have a chiv of Kesuvah, but you don't have to pay it out until the man predeceases his wife or divorces her. Or there's no chiv of Kesuvah until the man dies or divorces her. In that moment, the chiv of Kesuvah begins, and so on, as we'll discuss as we go through the Gemara. Okay. Now, they used to marry girls very young. So when they used to marry a girl, if she was a psula, it's very important to know, because not only how much you pay for the Kesuvah, the stage of arusa, there's no real Kesuvah. There's a machlekes, there's a Kesuvah by arusa. There's not a Kesuvah. And in fact, we can learn more later. Some places they never even wrote a Kesuvah because it's a Tanai Bezin. It's automatic. You don't have to do anything about it. It's automatic. Now, if you marry this girl, you expect her to be a virgin. So there's a haim in there, and it's supposed to, the area is very, very tight. If you find that it's not so, that means you think in your mind that something happened. Maybe she already had relations with men before she got into this marriage. Is it a mekachtas, the whole thing? I thought I'm marrying a psula. It turned out to be she wasn't. Or if it actually happened after we got engaged, because in those days engagement was 12 months, then there's a bigger problem. That she might have done it willingly, and she becomes asa to me. So it's important to know. Now, the Bezins used to convene on Monday and Thursday. Yeshua made a takana that all Bezins should convene on Monday and Thursday, because that's also when Kriyas HaTorah was. So people came from the villages into the cities. So everything happened on Mondays and Thursdays. And we're worried that a man, once he fell in love with his wife, he will not report things which are also to him because he's just going to ignore it. So we want to make sure that if there's anything wrong, it should happen very quickly before they had a chance really to solidify their marriage or cement their marriage, so that he would come and say, look, she's also to me and we can't stay together. So therefore there was a takana as follows. In those days when the Bezin used to convene on Monday and Thursday, psula nisas liyem revi'ah. Girl used to get married on Wednesday by day, not Wednesday night, which is by us Leil Chamishi. No, that's no good. It's only Wednesday by day, and we'll soon learn more why. And Almana gets married on Thursday. More later on will say, because Thursday is a bracha. That's the day that the dogim were created and they multiplied. So marry on Thursday. And the Mishnah explained, Pamayim b'Shabbos, twice a week. But it didn't Yoshuin ba'ayoras, twice a week. The Bezdin used to convene in the city. So therefore, we want him to get married Wednesday by day. So Wednesday night, you're already over with the wedding and everything else. Now you can have relations. If he has any taina that maybe she wasn't a psula, Thursday morning, he would, because they don't have yet a strong relationship, you rush to Bezin and report to them. Now, look, I think that she was not a psul at all. Now, what is the difference? What is the difference? Now, it depends as follows. If she's an ordinary Bas Yisrael, we don't really know what happened. There's a Sfek Sveika. First of all, could be it happened before they got engaged, or it happened after they got engaged. After they got engaged, then they're not allowed to stay married. She was Mizana after they got engaged. And even after they got engaged, how you know was willingly, maybe she was raped and she was embarrassed to say anything. So there's a Sfek Sveika, and therefore she would be mutter to her husband. So what's the point? The point is that two exceptions where it's not a Sfek Sveika, there's only one suffix. If he's a Kohen, then there's only one suffix. Did it happen before they got engaged or after? Because once they got engaged, it makes absolutely no difference whether she was raped or whether it happened willingly. She's also to her husband. Or if she got engaged to this guy right before she became 30 years old. If it happened, there's no suffix that happened before 30 years old because a psulim would come right back. So therefore, it must have happened after they got engaged. No, there's only one suffix. The suffix is willingly or not willingly. In fact, we'll see later on that pitik tana einus, that by tana, even willingly is really considered einus. So there's only two possible scenarios where it's asa, and they're the meat. But Rabbi and Tom says, but like plug, we decided that all women should be the same situation, should be married then. So here you have an exception where the majority by like plug follows the minority. Now, what the most women have to get married on Wednesday because of this case of the Eishes Kohen. We also have another case where the majority follows the minority. This is most rare. It's Friday night. We say Vaychulu. Why do we say Vaychulu second time after Shmoneh? We already said Vaychulu in Shmoneh Friday night. Why do we say it again? We say it again because when Shabbos falls on Yom Tov, you don't say Vaychulu in Shmoneh. So because of the couple of Shabbosim every few years that we don't say Vaychulu, we know what every single Shabbos we say Vaychulu. So here you have an example where a minority changes the majority or has an impact on the majority. Anyway, that's how Taisus learns. Rashi learns the reason why you get together is because people then will talk about it, and there were any witnesses that committed a sin, they'll come forward, and then we will establish what actually happened. So therefore, all women, it's negeya, not only to the Bas Kohen, but even to other women as well. And Taisus then has this question of Rashi. Let's continue in Gemara. Why is it that they say psula in Sas and Why should a psula get married on Wednesdays? We learned Giya's man. What happens? They were engaged for 12 months. Now, while they're engaged for 12 months, the husband is not obligated to provide for her. She's at home and so on and so forth. She cannot eat truma because either we're scared that she'll bring it to her house and they're failing, or because maybe he'll find some kind of a defect and unravel the entire marriage. But what had Giya's man? The 12 months have expired. Time to get married. And yet nothing happened. Then V'lo needs to get married. He needs to start providing for her. And in fact, you can even eat truma as well. You can eat truma as well. And when it comes to almana, we allow 30 days to prepare. But for a psula, we allow 12 months. I guess because she's young, you need to frame of mind and everything else, all the preparations. But 12 months expire, he takes now on the responsibilities. We'll talk about this later in the Gemara. Yachol, I would have thought, what happens if Giya's man be'echva Shabbos? What happens, it says here, if the 12 months expires on a Sunday? Now, the thing is, Al Mishnah says you get married on Wednesday, and it happened on a Sunday. What you do, get married on a Sunday? I would have thought, well, Sunday, 12 months expires, start feeding her. No. That's why it says get married on Wednesday. No. If it falls on a Sunday, it's not your fault. You cannot get married. You have to wait till Wednesday, so you don't have to start providing for her because it's totally not your fault that you cannot get married at this moment. Says Rabbi Yosef, Mored Avram. So this is what Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel. That why does a girl get married on Wednesdays? Because in case the 12 months expire on a Sunday, you have to wait till Wednesday. He's not even answering his question why you get married on Wednesday. And also, our Mishnah gives a reason why you get married on Wednesday, and you connect our Mishnah to another Mishnah which gives no reason. On the contrary, that Mishnah there needs our Mishnah to explain why not on Sunday. So what are you telling me, Rabbi Shmuel, that the reason why you get married Wednesday is because of that Mishnah there? God of Avram, totally Tanya, but the light Tanya. You're taking our Mishnah and you're saying, you know why Wednesday? Because of another place where it says, and there doesn't give any reason. Hi Tanya, where does it say yes? Where is there a reason? Where's not a reason? Tanya. Both places explains why that particular din applies. Why our Mishnah says why Wednesday, because Thursday they Bezdin convenes. We're actually going to talk about why not Monday, Sunday as well. You can get married on Sunday because Monday morning the Bezdin convenes. We'll see later why we don't want women to get married on Sundays. Interesting. Moshe Feinstein and Pascal the Chuvas, you're not allowed to have weddings and simchas on a bar mitzvah. It happens to fall on that day, by b'yem. But if it's not by b'yem or a wedding, you're not allowed to do it on Sundays because it's a goyish yom tov, and you're not allowed to just deliberately make a wedding on the day of a goyish yom tov. That was when he wrote it then. Today, I think Sunday is just a day off for anybody. Nobody even knows the origins of Sunday. Ella, this is what we meant to say. Totally Tanya. The Mefarish Timer, our Mishnah clearly explains why Wednesday, gives a good reason. And then, but the Tanya time there it says if it falls out on a Sunday, it's not your fault. You got to wait till Wednesday. It does not give a reason. So why is Shmuel saying that the reason of our Mishnah is hinges on that Mishnah over there? It talks about that if he falls out the 12 months expiring on a Sunday, you got to wait till Wednesday. There's no reason given. In fact, this is what Abiyah said. Why do we say Psul Nisas and Revi? Why do we say that a psula gets married on Wednesday? In case he finds that she's not a psula, he has a claim that she's not a psula. He would wake up and go to the bezin on Thursday morning. He would go to bezin. No, he's saying that what is the reason why that you cannot get married on what do you call it? Why you get married on Wednesday? You know that you go to Thursday to bezin. Says the Gemara. But you might say, why can't you the same cheshbon marry on Sunday afternoons, and Monday morning you can always go to Bezin? The time if you had any time you go to Bezin. So we answer. Interesting. Shok to chachamim. The chachamim out of the way. Shok means like diligent, a masmid. Chacham went out of the way to make sure that the wedding is as nice as possible for Israel and that nobody's no stress. Give them 3 days. They had no refrigerators or anything else. Whatever they made, they had to last for a long time. So to make it as close as possible to the wedding. So therefore, the people should prepare for the wedding 3 days, because if you make it on a Sunday, Shabbos, you can't do anything. Then and last week already started to get too early. You don't have that much time. If you can't go back to previous Wednesday. So therefore, we want 3 days to work. So till Wednesday, you have 3 days, full days, that you can go ahead and prepare for the wedding properly. On Wednesday, you get married, there's no pressure, everything was done properly, and then you have enough food to go for the wedding and also for the days afterwards, for the Shah Brachas. Now, so now that you tell me that the reason is because of Shaktu Oisa. By the way, today, since there's no bezin today, we can get married any day of the week because it makes absolutely no difference. Says the Gemara, and Shmuel says, now that we said that we don't want you to get married on Sunday, we want you to wait till Wednesday. Now we understand that the other thing that we learned. So then with the other mission that we learned, he came Sunday, the 12 months ended. He didn't married. Came 12 months generally. He has to stop providing for her. But if he fell out on a Sunday, we do not allow him to get married on Sunday for the reason above. It says in our Mishnah, then it's not his fault. Then therefore he doesn't have to start providing for her. Only when it comes Wednesday, they get married, then he has to start providing for her. Now comes the conclusion, halacha. So what do we see from here? Clearly, according to the version we read right now, only if the 12 months expire and the reason for the delay is his fault, he has to stop providing for her. But if it's not his fault, his hands are tied, then he doesn't have to provide for her until he's able to marry her. So my conclusion will be, what about if he got sick? In other words, it's not his fault of the delay. Or she got sick. No, it's nobody's fault. For example, she became a niddah, therefore you can't get married. It's a chuppah niddah, we'll see later. Just like if the 12 months end on a Sunday, we don't let him get married because we want you to get married on a Wednesday. So too, the reason why you don't get married on Sunday is when he got sick or she got sick or she became a niddah. And all of these instances, you don't have to provide until you're able to get married, only if it's your fault. That's version number one. Only if it's your fault, you have to stop paying if you don't get married by the end of 4 months. Version number two. The others who ask it in the form of a question. What happened? Okay, we know that the Chachamim don't let him get married. You don't have to pay. What about if what if he got sick? If it's, let's say, it's not his fault, but not that the Chachamim let him, he just got sick. Mahu. What happens if the 12 months expire and suddenly he got sick on that day? Does he have to start providing for her or not? And what's the two sides of the question? We can say as follows. Oh, sometime am I over there? What's the reason why when the Chachamim don't let you get married? Why is it that you're not liable? Why is that responsible? You have to start paying for her. Mishum the honest, it's not your fault. The Chachamim don't allow you to get married on a Sunday. The Hachanami honest can argue, say, yeah, it's not your fault. You got sick. What do you want? Or perhaps. Hasam anis betakanta the kin rabbanon. They're the same rabbanon who said they have to start providing for her after 12 months. The same rabbanon who won't let you get married right now. So therefore, it makes sense. The rabbanon say, look, we're not letting you get married. How can we tell you that, 12 months went by, you didn't marry her, go ahead and start paying for her. So it makes sense that the rabbanon say, okay, wait till you're allowed to marry her. But hachaloi, over here, the rabbanon is not the ones who are not letting you get married. You had a problem. So what? 12 months expired, stop paying. In other words, it's not a question of being your fault or not your fault. Even in the case where it's not your fault, you still have to pay. The only reason why you have to pay in the case of falling on a Sunday, because the Rabbanan are the ones who don't let you get married. Okay, the intim Shalom, if you can accept that argument, that if he got sick, therefore we don't care. So what if you got sick? That's too bad. You should get married 12 months expire. If you got sick, that's too bad for you. What about Chosehi? He's ready to get married. She's the one who got sick, and therefore they cannot get married. What happens in that case? So here, there's more grounds to say that he should have to pay for it. Now, do we say, Matzi Amno, he could say, look, I'm ready. I'm here. Let's get married. And it's your problem. So why should I pay for you? What's the svara? Why should he pay for her in this case here? Perhaps Matzi Amrele, she could say to him, Nistach v'sadeu. Your field got flooded. We're learning more about Matzia. What happens if I sell you a field, the next day there's a massive flood and lose the field? Or in fact, as we'll talk about it before, you picked up the field, you have a deposit, suddenly there's a terrible rain and the flood of the field. So the vendor can say, it's your field. It's your bad mazel. Leave me alone. Same thing here. She can say to him, look, I'm engaged to you. The Chachamim, you have to marry me in 12 months. Now I got sick. Your field became flooded. It's your bad luck. And therefore, because of your bad luck, I don't have to suffer, and you have to still pay me out. You have to still pay me out. So in other words, not only if he got sick does he have to pay her out. The only time so far that he doesn't is when the Rabban don't let you get married. But if you got sick, or even if she got sick, too bad on you, and you have to stop paying. Okay, but what is now? Pearson Nida, what if she became a Nida? So here is no question. If B'Shas Vesta, this is in those days, most women, it says actually in Gemara that women had a stronger constitution then than today, and they had fixed periods. Almost all the women had fixed periods. When we look more Nida, we see how the Gemara concept talks about they had fixed times, fixed intervals, 30-day intervals was fixed. Every month, exactly the same time you knew when she is going to have a period. So B'Shas Vesta, if there happens to be the 12-month, end of 12 months land on the day, coincide with the day that's her Vestas, then you can't say you're bad mazel. This is your life. This is you. Before you knew me, you also had exactly this day every month. You had your Vestas. So therefore, like to buy the question, she can't say it's your bad mazel. No, it isn't. This is who you are, and therefore I don't have to pay you because it's your fault that the 12 months ends on that day. She cannot say nistach v'sadei, you feel got flooded. Our question is shalei b'shas vesta. Our question is if it's an irregular period, can she then say it's an irregular period? It's tough luck on you. It's your bad mazel because it's irregular, and therefore you have to start feeding me. Or do we say since there are quite a number of women who do have irregular periods, not the majority, but quite a number, a significant minority. Therefore, he can say to her, "That's who you are. You generally have irregular periods, or you're a woman that happens many times, and therefore don't say it's my bad mazel. That's who you are, and I don't have to start paying you till you're ready to get married." Mike, even the labor shas vesti. On the one hand, we can say it's not the regular period. Matzi she can say nistach v'sadeu. Too bad you feel got flooded. Or perhaps keeping the kanoshi the kamishani vestayu. Since there are plenty of women that their vestas continues changing, is kashas vest. I mean, just like this is her. This is her. Her fixed period is to have an unfixed period, and therefore this is her nature. Therefore that's the way it is, and therefore you can't say to the husband it's your tough luck, and in that case he doesn't have to pay her. So we have two answers in the Gemara. So the first version of the Gemara is that the only time that he has to stop paying in 12 months is if it's his fault, the delay. Any other reason, if it's not his fault, doesn't matter if he's sick, she's sick, neither, none matters. If it's not anybody's fault, you don't have to pay. In the second version here, we're saying that no, that if it's his fault, even if it's not his fault, if it's his reason for the delay, then if he got sick, for example, he has to stop paying it straight away. And in fact, even if it's her, if it's an accident by her, something happened, she got affirmed, that he has to pay. It's only the question we have here is if she's a nida shalei b'shas vesta, is that considered tough luck on him, or that's considered her nature? That's
Can
how
I
that's what we're
ask,
asking. So
why
yeah,
would you expect a fiance to know the wife's periods to tell her you're normally regular or irregular?
he doesn't at all. But he cannot. She can say to him. She cannot say to him, "It's your bad mazel." Just like no one's expected to know there'll be a flood in the field the next day, but it happened. So we say, well, since you're the owner and it happened on your watch, it's your bad luck. So she can say the same thing. He doesn't have to know. But the question is an irregular period. Comes along, Pashid Rabbi Choy came along and resolved. Now, very interesting, the Taisus here. Taisus has a discussion here. Who is this Rabbi Choy? Taisus brings that there are some of them that the Rashbam said Rabbi Choy is actually from the Goinim, known as the author of the She'iltus Rabbi Choy Goin. And according to Taisus, he lived the very first generation of Goinim, the end of the Amoraim, the very end. This is actually not part of the Gemara. This is like added on to the Gemara. And that's what someone is saying. Taisus finds it hard to believe because Rav Ashi is responding to that. Rav Ashi was the last generation of Gemara. So this Rabbi Choy must be an Amoira, not the Goinim. But those who say it's the Goinim, Rashbam, means that there are parts in the Gemara which were not written by the Gemara, which were added later on. And generally we know which parts they are because the Taisus or other Rishonim, the Ritva, other Rishonim pick it up. Like the beginning of Kedushin, the first Amud that those who say it's not from the Gemara, it's from Rabban Sfaroi, right here, Rabbi Choy. So they pick it up whenever it happens. But otherwise, it's everything we learn in the Gemara was written by Amorai. Anyway, comes along Rabbi Choy, as follows. Let's look at the words of that Mishnah. It says, "Higias man, v'loi nisu." The time came, and v'loi nisu. Now, there's two ways of writing it: nosu or nisu. Nosu means that he didn't get married. That means the husband, it's his, whatever reason is, he did not proceed with the marriage. Nisu is they did not get married. That means it's either, they both could be culpable, husband or the wife. So it said, Rabbi Choy said, he points out, since it says he gives man v'loi so they did not get married, that means it could also be her culpability that did not get married. The din is nevertheless he has to provide for from him and eat truma. Now, let's say that he held back. She held back. What are we talking about? That she held back and yet he has to pay for her. If she's holding back, if it's her fault, why in the world should he have to provide for her? It's her fault. It was an accident. So in the first version of the Gemara, we learned that if it's an accident, you still have to provide. I don't care who the accident is, you have to provide. It's only if the delay was his fault. But Rabbi says no, that if it's an accident, you have to pay for it. If it's not a fault, you got sick, whatever it is, he has to pay for it. Now, if it's talking about such a case, what do you call it? If it was an accident, like in such a case, sorry, if she holds back, the wine will concede it. And if it's talking about a case like what we're asking, and yet talking about like she was a person, whatever it is, Uktani, and it says Oichlis Mishalai, Oichlis Truma. Must be talking about that. Let's say she was a person or something. She became sick. That she became sick. Your question was, what happened if she became sick? So it's totally not his fault. He says, I'm ready. Kayimna, I'm standing, I'm ready. And she became sick. You asked the question before, if she becomes sick, what happens then? And it says clearly here, the Lain Nisu, they didn't get married either on account of him. And on account of her cannot mean that she decided to delay. And of course, why should he provide for her? Obviously, it was an accident. And it's clear he has to provide for her. So therefore, to answer the question that if she got sick, he has to provide for her. Not like the first version of the Gemara is that if someone got sick, he doesn't have to provide. It's only if the delay was his fault. In Abba Choy's version, that if even if the delay was not his fault, the delay was because of her, even though she got sick, he has to. Then it says he clearly has to provide for her. So the Gemara. And before we said you don't have to provide for anybody, only if it's your fault. Here we're saying you provide even if it's nobody's fault. Now, we didn't resolve the question about irregular period. We're talking about your first question was, what happened if she got sick? And we're saying clearly you have to provide. Very difficult is Gemara. The Taisus even talks about other Shainim. Everything was oral. What do you mean, nisu or nasu? There was no yud. Nisu is with a yud and nasu without a yud. How would they know? If it's without a yud, how it's written, with a yud, without a yud, what's all this? How can you be medayik in the Torah? You're medayik on letters. But here, how can you medayik on letters, how it's written? So Taisus says when they memorize it orally, that's how they memorize it. That loy nisu instead of loy nasu. And then Taisus brings a proof from Apidiktuk that if it was nasu, then the rest of the Mishnah should be written a little bit differently. Anyway, something about it further. I disagree. Even in the second version, I'm going to follow the first version, which is that the only time that you have to stop providing is if the delay is on account of you. If there's an einus, he does not have to provide for it. If there's an einus, not doesn't matter if it's nobody's fault. 12 months expire. He wants to get married. The woman is sick. He doesn't have to pay for it. Or he's sick. You don't have to pay. With the kamakvi inhu, and really, the only time that he has to pay when the Mishnah says comes 12 months and you didn't get married, you have to pay. Is only if he delayed it wantonly for no particular reason. So if we're talking about hit only if it's his fault, then it should have said nosu. Why is it nisu? You're right. It should have said nosu. But the idea the Tana Bereisha B'Diti in the beginning of the Mishnah, it starts talking about her when she get married, so on and so forth, and we're talking about her. So therefore we continue talking as if she's included. So I'm safe with her, but really, what do you call it? The halach is like the first version of Ravashi, which is only time that he has to start paying after 12 months is if it's his fault. Only if it's his fault. That is the delay. Otherwise, if it's an einus, you don't have to pay it all. Okay, so because the Mishnah starts off 12 months for a psula, 30 days for almana, so we start talking about the woman. So later on, when we talk about the time came to get married, we talk about both of them collectively. Now they introduced the idea, the way we're learning that, that an einus, if it's an einus, in any way you didn't, it's not a question of done meeting you. You have an obligation to stop providing, get married in 12 months. But if the reason why you didn't get married is because of an einus, we respect that. And we give you an extension of time. So now we recognize that an einus means that you cannot say you didn't meet your condition because the fact is it's not your fault, right? So an einus matters, it has an impact. No, it's only if it's your fault of the delay. So comes along Rav and says, we'll have two versions of this. Today we'll learn one version and tomorrow we'll learn the other version. Amar Rav says, Rav, when it comes to gittin, you make a condition and then you don't meet the condition, not because you didn't want to, because some accident occurred. The accidents, we don't respect. Sorry? We don't, accidents don't mean anything. Alma Kasava Rava, we'll see what that means. Rava said, Ein Einis Begittin. There's no such thing as an Einis Begittin. There's no excuse. The reason why I didn't meet the Tanai because there's an Einis. There's no such excuse. For example, he gave a get to his wife and he said, I will be, if I'm not back within 12 months, then this get should be valid. He's going overseas and Chas v'Shalom he might be lost and he doesn't want her to remain in Laguna. So he said to her, if I'm not back at a certain time, I'm not back in 6 months, this get becomes activated and you are divorced. What happens, the reason why he didn't come back 6 months is there was a war that broke out and he couldn't travel. So it wasn't his fault. He really wanted to come home, but he couldn't. So there was an einus. So do we say, look, in that case, really he wants to come home. He didn't, don't ignore the fact that he didn't fulfill it tonight. So we said, no, einus has no impact. And there's no einus by getting the fact that he didn't come back after 6 months, you didn't meet the tonight. Now that's going to be the discussion here, where you didn't meet the tonight because of an einus. Ain't einus begitten or yesh einus begitten? And just very quickly, as the Achreinim discuss what exactly the chakir is as follows. When I say I'll give you a get, on the condition, the Tanai, that in 6 months I'm back home. There's two ways of understanding what happened there. One way is, well, what's the role of the Tanai? Is the role of the Tanai to activate the get, or the role of the Tanai is not to deactivate the get? In other words, as soon as they gave you a get, the get now is active. It's a good get in 6 months' time. It'll become it's already as if it's active in 6 months' time. If I don't meet the Tanai cancels the get. Is that what happens? The Tanai is canceling it? Or the pshat is no. The ma'isa that I did, the get, does not become activated until I meet the Tanai. If I don't meet the Tanai is not canceling it. It never happened in the first place. No, the Tanai, you need to activate the get. So there's two ways. One way is that the Tanai activates the get, and one way is sort of that the Tanai cancels the get. Or the Maisa activates it and the Tanai cancels it, or the Tanai is what activates it. And therefore, if you're learning the Tanai cancel the get, the Tanai has to be strong. And if it's the reason why you didn't meet the Tanai because of an einus, maybe it doesn't deactivate, it doesn't cancel it. But if the Maisa already is strong enough, and what do you call it? And if you didn't do the Tanai, the Maisa remains. And I don't care why you didn't do the Tanai. The Maisa is that strong, and therefore the Maisa continues, even though it was an accident. Too bad. Anyway, let's continue the Gemara. So first version of the Gemara is einus has no bearing. You didn't meet the Tanai. That's it. Says the Gemara, and how do I know that? No, how does you know that? We learned. A guy said, now we learned. And this continues like Gemara because we just learned that einus has a bearing about 12 months, but not by gittin. Now when it comes to tonight, it says, in the Mishnah, it says, Harei, this is following as you get. If I'm not back in 12 months, this is a valid get. No, he didn't want her to marry, he didn't want to marry good, and so on. What happened? He died. So why didn't he come home by 12 months? Because he died. So obviously he couldn't meet it tonight. But it's much more than that. When he gave the get, he said, if I'm not back in 12 months, the get should become active. So when does the get become active? The end of 12 months. The problem is the end of 12 months, he's no longer alive. So who's divorcing her? He's already dead. And therefore, the ain't get la'achamisa. There's no one around to give her the get. So therefore, it's not a valid get. So we have two things by a mace. First of all, it's an act. The reason why he didn't fulfill the Tanai because it's an accident, he couldn't help it. And the second thing is because ain't get la'achamisa. You can't give a get after he's dead. Now, because we only used the example of mace, we don't use other examples of oinus. We could have used the example, he got sick. He didn't. We only talked about death, which sounds like the only reason why she's not divorced is because he died. Had he got sick, and the fact he didn't come home, I don't care, it's not his fault, he's sick, he's in a hospital tied up somewhere, it doesn't matter. If he didn't come into a month and the get is valid. So we see close from here that there's no oinus by gittin. That's why the only case that the Mishnah mentions is death, not another form of accident, which would have been a bigger chiddush, says the Gemara. Mesud ain't a get, only because he died, it's not a get, because ain't get lachamisa. And therefore, what happens if there were no children? She's bound to her brother-in-law. But if he got sick, it's not his fault that he didn't come back. Harei a get, it would have been a valid get. That's what I was proof that this is not an argument when it comes to tonight. Says who says the Dilma, perhaps I'll tell you, again, maybe even sick also wouldn't have been a get. So how come the Mishnah uses an example? Mace should have been a bigger chiddush. Even chola, since that's not their fault. There's a tinus oinus, and even though he didn't come back to a month because he got sick, it's not a valid get. Why does the Mishnah say that? There's a chiddush by talking about mace, and what is that? How do you know that there's no get after somebody dies? If he gave it while he's alive, and he said, "I want to become active at a certain time," maybe even after his death, the get is still valid because he gave it to her while he was alive, even though it didn't become active until afterwards. Maybe. How do you know not? Kamashlan. This is the source right here. The ain't get lachamisa, and that's why the Mishnah talks about mace. To another denote together. And get lachamisa. Says, well, that's what it come and teach you how to lay. We already know that from the beginning of that very Mishnah. Why? It says there, he says to her, this follow is a get, if I die right after, if I die, then this becomes a good get. Clearly, he meant the get shouldn't be activated till he dies. Or this will be your get if I never recover from the sickness. In other words, he dies. Or he clearly said this get should be active right after I die. What's the reason for all three cases? Because after he died, who's giving her the get? So we already know the principle and get lachamisa. So when it comes about the case of 12 months, why illustrate the case with the case of mace? Tells a big chiddush. He got sick. Is that no? He got sick. The fact is that he come back. It would have been a valid get because ain't tinus oinus legitin. There's no time of oinus by gittin. So the Gemara, no. Who said? Maybe really the Mishnah comes to and get lachamisa. But there's a chiddush here, and what's that? The rabbis say, Rabbi Yossi says an interesting thing. Rabbi Yossi says that if you write a date in the get, and you say that this get, if this person dies, this should become a get. Rabbi Yossi said it's a valid get. It sounds like he's saying that after he dies, it should become a get. It's too late. Who's giving the get? He says, why did you write a date? Why did you write today's date? Just say that in 30 days and 90 days after I die, whatever it is. Why do you put today's date in the get? You know why? Because you want it to be retrospective, even though you didn't spell it out. It's obvious. The only reason why you put the date in the get is to be retrospective. As if to say, if I'm not back at a certain time, then retrospectively, this get is a valid get, like mehayim, as if it came from today. Therefore, the get became active before the guy died. So the Gemara is to, and therefore our Mishnah over here comes to argue and says no, that even though you put a date in the get, if he says if he didn't come back out to a month or he died in the middle, that's it. We don't agree with the fact that he wrote that. If you didn't clearly say ma'achshav or mahayim, it's a get takes only effect after 12 months and he's dead already. So to negate nothing to do with oinus. The chiddush here is about get after misa and to negate the opinion of the Rabbi Seino. The Tanya Rabbi Seino is the rule. Rabbi Seino said you're allowed to get married. The Amarina and Man. Rabbi Seino, we said, who are these rabbis? I'm from a small Beit Din of the Shara Mishcha. It's amazing. We had more about the Zara that they banned wine of a guy, they banned milk of a guy, they banned bread of a guy. Then we had a bezin that banned the oil of a guy. And a while later, they realized how difficult it is, so they matter it. And so ever since, that was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's grandson, he's called Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And ever since then, that bezin was known as, this is the bezin that was makel with oil, or that was matter for oil. Some say it was done in a sarcastic way, and some say it was done in a very complimentary way, that had the courage to realize that their gzeira was too difficult, and they went ahead and they, it's a bigger kunst to be matter than to be matter asa. No big deal to come along and say, this is asa, this is asa. Kunst is to come along and say that this is mutter, especially we're the ones who asked it, and now we're being matter it. So it took a lot of courage, and they're saying it in a very complimentary way. Anyway, this is the bezin that was matter the oil. Savri law, they follow the view of Rabbi Yasi. And what's the view of Rabbi Yasi? Because Rabbi Yasi says, the fact to put a Danish star, that so proves that you want it to happen before he died. So there's no proof. So how does Rava, to go back to our question, how does Rava know about oinus, that the oinus has no validity than the case over here? But the reason why we mentioned death is to teach us something totally different about a get after it takes effect after he died, but the date was earlier, what happens? The element Sefer later on, it says, Ma'achshav today. So he added the word Ma'achshav. I wanted to get to be retrospective. Im loy bosi mekan va yubeis chodesh. I'm not back in 12 months. And then I want to get to be retrospective. Umeis b'toich shnei months chodesh. If he died within the 12 months, we say, Hareze get. It's a valid get, right? Why is it a valid get? The fact that it didn't come back out of 12 months. And what's the logic in that? Even though it's retrospective, don't tell me there's no get after death, because it's not after death, it's retrospective. So the vart is because it's an oinus. So the same thing is if he was sick, the fact is it didn't come back out of 12 months, it's retrospective. So we see that there's no claim to say, oh, it's an oinus, because death is the greatest oinus you can have. Death was mamash not your fault under any circumstance. Yet we say it doesn't matter. The fact he didn't come back, it's retrospective. So surely if he got sick, which is less of an oinus, and the fact he didn't come back, it's retrospective. So we see from here that oinus is not a claim. Oh, sorry, the reason why I didn't meet it tonight, it wasn't my fault. That doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. How does it get? Maze. Who are the so you want to know? Who said? Dilma Maze Dafke. No, maybe only if the guy died do we say we know what's going through his mind. If the guy died, we know that he wanted to be retrospective. But if he was sick, we know that he wanted to come home. It's not his fault. He surely would rather have the get not become active, so that eventually when he's better, he'll come home to his wife. Why, if he's dead, is he happy to have Bri get? Because he's trying to spare her the humility of Chalitza or Yibum. So therefore, if he died, on the contrary, that's his whole purpose, his whole intent. He wants it to be retrospective. But if he was sick, he does not want it to be effective because he wants to eventually come home to his wife. Maybe Mes Dafka, we say it's retrospective. No, really, maybe there is an Oinus by Gittin, but not by Mace. Why? Because his intention was, wanted to fall before brother-in-law. No proof one way or another. So how does Rava know that Oinus is not an argument? Elma, the following case, a guy said to his wife, he was going to a dangerous place, and he was scared, who knows in those days if he'll ever come back. So he said to him, if I'm not back within 30 days, this should be a valid get. Okay. Also, he came at the end of 30 days. He said, listen, what happened was there was a terrible flood. Maybe suddenly there was a river crossing between the two, and he couldn't cross. Either there was a flood, or suddenly the ships weren't working. Something happened. He couldn't come. He was standing. He can see the city. He can see the village. He's standing there, but he can't cross. Amalu, he screamed out, Chazu Dasoi, look, everybody, I'm here. But he wasn't here. He was on the other side of the river. He wasn't in town. But it's totally not his fault. Shmuel Paskind, Lav Shmei Masya. The fact is, he didn't arrive. The fact is, it didn't arrive. Where is he clear from here? That the reason why he didn't arrive is not his fault. It doesn't matter. The fact he didn't arrive. So we see that there's no time of oinus by Gittin. So no raya, why not? The Dilma, it seems that's quite often that things flood or that strikes or ships don't work. So, an anticipated oinus, he should have spelled it on Kali. So I'm not back in 30 days, but not because of the river overflowing, then it's not my fault. Because he knew that this oinus can happen and he didn't spell it out, then that means you didn't care about the oinus. You said, no matter what, regardless, I'll be back in 30 days. And you weren't. I don't care the river was there. You knew that it could happen and you didn't mention it. Shiny, the kivin the boiler the snow, you should have included that in your tonight. But you didn't even the afshir and afshir, it's your fault. But if an oinus happened, he got sick, which is something you had no anticipation was going to happen, then maybe that oinus is a valid taina, and you say, look, it's not my fault. I really wanted to be back in 12 months. I just got sick. So where does Rava know that there's no taina of oinus by Gittin? Murray concludes, you're right. There's no basis for it. Rava svara the nafshikam, it's purely his own svara. Mishum Tznu is he was worried about the women who were very modest. Mishum Prutz is the women who were I guess promiscuous. But just quickly, Mishum Tznu is the women who were very modest. The Amrit, if you can tell them the loyal have get, if you can tell them, look, that if there was an oinus that oinus is a valid taina, and therefore, if there was an oinus, then he didn't meet the tanai. It's not his fault. It's as if he didn't meet the tanai. The get, therefore, is not a valid get. Then zimnin delanis. Sometimes there was no oinus, but she's always machmir. Maybe the reason why he's not back is there's an oinus. She'll never get married. She won't rely on the fact that he said 12 months, I'm not back, go home, because she'll think maybe the reason why he's not back is because some accident happened. And if the halach is that if an accident happened, yes, time is only beginning, she'll say, how can I get married? Maybe he wants to come home, but he's being held captive. Who knows? With Savra the honest, she'll remain in Laguna the Yasa, and she'll sit there. And just one more line, and the same token is the women who are totally immodest. They're going to use the slightest excuse to get a marriage. The Amrit, if you can tell them that Lola have a gitter, if you can tell them that what? That it's not a get. If you can tell them that, look, if it's an oinus, he didn't meet it tonight, and therefore it's not a valid get. Zimnidana, sometimes there will be an oinus, but Amrit, she will say, oh, an oinus, you said not a valid get, but I'm going to right away convince herself all the time, no, he could come back home. He's wrong to. Even in a case where it really was an oinus, she'll always come to the conclusion that there was no oinus, and therefore it's a valid get. She'll get married, and eventually she comes home, turns out to be that the kids are mamzerim. But also, mitzvah to get back to mamzerim, more mamzerim. Okay, we'll stop here. Tomorrow.